I had never thought much about that kind of question until the day of my sister's wedding. It was a quiet, beautiful countryside estate, nestled among tall trees, and far enough from the city to feel like a dream, like a step into another world. Everything about the ceremony was perfect. The soft music, the flowers, the warm sunlight slipping through the leaves overhead. But there's something about silence in a place like that. When it gets too quiet, your mind starts listening harder than it should. The moment that changed everything happened during the photo session, right after the ceremony. The guests were mingling near the garden. The photographer was calling out family names. I'd stepped away for a moment, near the edge of the woods, just to breathe in the pine and calm my nerves. That's when I heard it. A soft giggle, almost playful. It wasn't loud. In fact, it was just quiet enough to make me think maybe it came from a kid hiding behind the bushes. I parted the branches and looked through. And there he was, a tiny clown, sitting low among the dry leaves, his face painted in chalk-white makeup, lips stretched into an unnatural smile. He looked up, made eye contact, and gave me a slow wave. There wasn't supposed to be a clown. No one had mentioned hiring entertainment like that. This wasn't a circus-themed wedding, but I didn't get the chance to react. My sister was calling for me. I turned back toward the party. When I looked again, the clown was gone. No footsteps, no sound. I chalked it up to stress. Maybe even a trick of the light. I didn't tell anyone. But that night during the reception, I saw him again. He was standing near the edge of the field, just beyond the wooden fence that lined the property. The laughter was louder this time. Just one short burst that no one else seemed to notice. I pointed toward him, asked a few guests, "Do you see that guy over there?" But they just chuckled, saying I must have had one too many drinks. I hadn't. I was completely sober. I remember so clearly. He was standing so still, watching the crowd, but especially watching my sister. His head tilted slightly, like he was studying her. I couldn't explain it, but something about the way he stood, the quiet menace of it, made my skin crawl. I decided to approach him, walk straight out there and demand to know who he was. But as I reached the wooden gate, he was gone. Again. Just vanished. No sign he'd ever been there. That night I couldn't sleep. I stayed up in the living room of the estate's guest house. Every shadow outside the window making my heart skip. I had this horrible feeling, like someone was standing just beyond the glass, watching, waiting. The next morning, my sister was gone. She'd vanished sometime after midnight. Her wedding dress still hung neatly on the back of a chair. Her purse, her phone, even her shoes, all left behind in the room she'd been getting ready in. There was no note, no sign of a struggle, nothing. The police were called in. They reviewed the estate's security footage from the night before. And there, at 1:17 a.m., a figure appeared on camera. A small figure, dressed in clown attire, walking silently down the upstairs hallway. He paused outside my sister's room, turned the doorknob, slipped inside. The footage ended there. No footage of him leaving. And somehow, the door had remained locked from the inside. Weeks passed, then months. No sign of her. The police turned up nothing. Eventually, our family moved away. The grief was too heavy. The estate was sold to strangers. I tried to forget about it, about everything that happened that night, but it was impossible. The feeling that something was still watching me never went away. It followed me. It lingered. A constant, gnawing presence. I moved to a different town, changed my phone number, and kept to myself. But that didn't stop the dreams. A year later, on the anniversary of the wedding, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a red balloon and a photo taken from behind my sister at the wedding. In the photo, standing among the trees in the distance, was the clown, looking directly at the camera, smiling, and I swear, his eyes were closed, but his mouth was smiling. Tomorrow morning, the police called. They had found someone wandering deep in the woods, near the old estate grounds. A woman, barefoot and dazed, wearing a torn white blouse. It was my sister, alive. When I saw her at the hospital, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was longer, her skin pale, but her eyes were hollow. She barely spoke. She didn't remember anything beyond the wedding. She thought she had simply gotten lost in the trees. No memory of the clown. No memory of the year she'd been missing. The doctors said she was dehydrated but physically unharmed. Psychologically, however, she was fractured. Like something had held her in a fog, just out of time. They say the mind protects itself from trauma. That sometimes the worst things get buried so deep, they never return. But late one night, as I sat by her hospital bed while she slept, she suddenly murmured something in her sleep. 4 words. Soft, childlike. Almost a whisper.
He still follows her.
I kept thinking, was he still watching us? I couldn't let it go. I started researching. Clown folklore, ghost sightings, local legends. I even went back to the estate. I needed answers. That's when I met a man named Ray at a nearby church. An older guy who used to work as a priest. He listened to my story without laughing once. When I showed him the photo, he just nodded and said,
"You've seen him. The Grinner."
According to Ray, the Grinner appears at events filled with joy. Weddings, birthdays, graduations, and takes someone. He feeds on happiness, twists it into fear, and uses laughter as a lure. But there was a way to stop him. Holy water and something harder. I had to face my fear, let it in, and walk through it. Ray blessed a small vial of holy water and gave it to me. I didn't know what I expected from Ray. Maybe some old folklore or a story meant to scare children into behaving. But the way he looked at me, that quiet seriousness, the weight in his voice when he said that name, the Grinner, it told me this wasn't just some ghost story. He told me the Grinner had been around for a long time, older than we think. It didn't matter what country, what language. There were always stories of something that laughed when no one else did. Something that showed up in moments of celebration and left someone missing afterward. The more joy, the stronger he became. He's not a spirit, Ray told me. He's a pattern, a hunger, a shadow that learned how to wear a smile. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. My sister was back, yes, but something in her had stayed behind. She'd sit by the window and stare at the dark, like she was waiting for something to return. And she still mumbled in her sleep. Sometimes she'd laugh softly, this low, broken giggle that made my blood run cold. So I did what Ray said. I went back to the estate, alone. It had been abandoned since the incident, fence falling apart, vines crawling over the porch, like the land itself wanted to forget. I brought the vial of holy water in my pocket. Ray told me I wouldn't see the Grinner unless I invited the fear in, unless I truly remembered. So I stood in the center of the ballroom where the reception had taken place, closed my eyes, and let myself feel it. The laughter, the doubt, the dread I felt when I saw him watching my sister. And something shifted. The air got heavier, like breathing underwater. The room dimmed, shadows deepened, Then I heard it. A chuckle. Low, echoing, right behind me. I turned slowly. He was there. Same tiny figure. White painted face. Lips stretched wide. But now I could see things I hadn't noticed before. His clothes looked older than they should. Like they were stitched by hand 100 years ago. His eyes weren't eyes at all. Just smooth, sealed lids. As if he smiled, even in his dreams. He didn't move, just stared, mouth twitching. My heart told me to run. But I remembered Ray's words. You have to walk through it. So I stepped forward. And he moved. Fast, his head jerked side to side like a puppet on strings. And a high-pitched laugh erupted. Too loud, too sharp for something that small. He rushed toward me, arms wide, and I barely managed to pull out the vial. I shouted and threw the holy water. It hit him square in the chest. There was no fire, no dramatic scream. The smile faltered. His face twitched like static. Then he stepped back, slowly, and vanished into the dark like fog, being pulled through a crack in the world. I stood there alone, shaking, the air suddenly clean and light again. I thought it was over, but it wasn't, because that night my sister spoke in her sleep again. But it wasn't laughter, it was a scream. And when I rushed into her room, she was sitting up, eyes wide, staring at something I couldn't see. She whispered,
He knows I'm free.
I don't know if we banished him, or just made him angry. But I sleep with a vial of holy water beside my bed now. And sometimes I still hear it, that faint, high giggle, somewhere just outside the window, waiting